Okay, we're looking at understanding Daniel 11 and the time of the end. Most of you were here during the first presentation. There is an outline, verse by verse of Daniel 11. The prophecy on the left-hand column, how history fulfilled that prophecy on the right-hand column. I do not cover every detail because if I did, we'd be here way too long. And most of you didn't like history that well. So that's not what I'm going to be doing in all detail. We're now going on to the time of the end. And very quick recap. The king of the north in Daniel 11 is the same as the powers listed in Daniel 2 and 7 and 8. Here's 2 and 7. Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, divided Rome at the little horn. Those are the kings of the north of Daniel 11. It's just a repeat and enlargement situation. Now, I was getting off of an elevator in a convention hall in Cincinnati, Ohio. ASI convention was going in and I had an exhibit. And I'm getting off the elevator wearing a shirt that says Islam and Christianity Prophecy Seminars. I don't know what I'm about to be facing as the elevator doors open. Across the street is the Cincinnati Reds ball field. They had just finished a game. And when the elevator's doors open, this is a convention center, so there's about 10 or so elevators down there, right? Elevator's door open, and there are just hundreds of people pushing to get on the elevators coming from the ball game. I'm all alone in the elevator. I just need to slip out the side as they push in, right? There's this group of 5 or 6 really big men. And they're very athletic big men. And as I'm slipping out the side, the biggest one of them all reaches over and taps me on the chest. Right there. What does that mean? People in the city don't go around touching other people. Except if you're that big, you can touch anybody. Especially when you've got that many friends around you. I whipped out my map. There's the Mediterranean, there's Italy. I said, there's this really neat Bible prophecy. You have Babylon comes into Jerusalem from the north. Then you have Medo-Persia. They come in from the north. Then the Greeks come in from the north. And it splits 4 ways, but Daniel only cares about 2, north and south. And the Seleucid Ptolemies fight back and forth. Jerusalem's caught in the middle. And then the Romans come in from the north. And Jesus dies in the center of this prophecy. And then after Rome, the empire splits, and the northern part follows Christianity, the southern part goes Islamic, and Jerusalem gets caught in the middle. There are 3 conflicts, the Crusades, the Ottomans, and the time of the end. At the time of the end, radical Islam is overthrown, moderate Islam follows papal-led Christianity, or traditional Christianity, and some follow Jesus in the Bible. That's the prophecy that I present. In that short amount of time, the elevator filled and it left. But since the big guy's talking to me, all his buddies standing behind him stayed. He asked me several questions. I'm not exactly sure how long it was happening, but while I was standing there by the elevator door and hundreds of people standing around, I'm answering Daniel 11 questions quickly. The door opens behind me. The elevator has made its run and come back. And the guys look at their leader, the big guy, and he nods. And they all get on the elevator. I see him pull out his room key, put it in the elevator, a slot on the elevator control panel, which means he can now take it to the penthouse level. And he pushes that button. And the doors close. And I'm left there standing thinking, okay, really, really big athletic guy with big athletic friends, with lots of money. My guess is I was just talking to a group of NBA players. But then I don't watch sports, so I don't know who I'm talking to. But what do you have that would make somebody like that just stop in a crowd and talk to you? I believe this is an issue that the time has come. Just this shirt has gotten me into some very interesting discussions. It's kind of fun to wear it. Only once or twice a bit dicey. Almost all of them good. So, what I didn't tell him was about the Sabbath. Because Jerusalem gets caught in the middle, but so does the Sabbath. And the king of the north changes it to Sunday, the king of the south changes it to Friday, and God's Sabbath keepers get caught in the middle all over the world. Simple question. What's it like to be a Sabbath keeper today, especially if you're Jewish? Is that already caught in the middle all over this planet? Jerusalem and God's people. And if you're one of God's Sabbath-keeping people, you're watching what's coming for you next. Okay, now, Daniel 11:29, at the appointed time he shall return and go towards the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter. The three conflicts, the former the Crusades, the appointed time the Ottomans, and the time of the end, radical Islam in today's world, I believe, and their allies. Okay, so we're going to be looking at this part of the prophecy right here and a little bit at the loud cry as well. Here's what it says about the time of the end. Now remember, the time of the end is not explained in Daniel 2, 7, or 8. It is left for Daniel 11, the time that you live in. This is the prophecy for us. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him. So the king of the south hits first. Islam and their allies. And the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind. Well, the Pope doesn't have a lot of military, but he sure does know how to borrow it through history. With chariots, horsemen, and many ships, and he shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. It's going to be a relatively quick conflict. He shall also enter the glorious land, that's Israel. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and Ethiopians shall follow at his, the king of the north's heels. One part's overthrown, one part follows traditional king of the north, traditional Christian, and one part escapes. We'll get into that in a little bit. So, radical Islam's going to go down. Moderate Islam's going to go along with the king of the north. And some people escape and present God's message. Those are the ones that escape when it's all over, too. Now, some definitions you need to understand. A caliphate. It is ruled by a caliph who claims global political and power, global geopolitical power and religious power. Church and mosque union. And a papacy. It is ruled by a pope who claims geopolitical power globally and religious power globally, right? So they're both political, religious powers that want to rule the whole earth. Is there room for two of these guys that both want to rule the whole earth at the same time? Nope. Every time you have a caliphate, you end up with a holy war. Arab caliphates, crusades. Ottoman caliphates, Holy League. And the Battle of Lepanto was a part of that. Time of the end, if you're going to have another caliphate, you would have another what? Holy war. By the way, my definition of a holy war, when both sides act like the devil in the name of God. And if you act like the devil, you are not of God. That's why God's people are going to get caught in the middle. Okay, continuing this. The Islamists are those who want to bring about a global caliphate, and they want the capital to be in the city they call Al-Quds. The rest of the world simply calls it Jerusalem. Let's see. If all the radical Muslims want Jerusalem as their capital, do you think Jerusalem just might get caught in the middle? And I've had scholars say, Tim, you're going to be an embarrassment to the church. Really? This is a slam dunk in today's world. Actually, Jesus could come right now and it could be argued it's already completed. There's been so much of this already happen. So who are these Islamists? Well, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State. Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, wants to be the caliph. And Iran, oh boy, do they want to take over the caliphate. Do you know what they call their special forces? Anybody know what the special forces are? There's the Republican Guard, but there's a part in there that's called the Quds Force, or Al-Quds Force. The Jerusalem Force. Why would they call their special forces trained to fight outside of outside of Iran, the Jerusalem Force? Because they intend to take it. And they publicly say they're going to wipe Israel off the face of the map and take over. Get an idea why Israel is a little not too friendly with Iran? What would the United States do if Canada developed the Washington, D.C. force and started preparing to take Washington, D.C.? You can see how things can get dicey in a hurry, right? That's what it's like in the Middle East. The moderate Muslims are those who have been aligning with Israel in the Abrahamic Accords. They're aligning with Israel and the West, traditional Christian world. Now, in 2011, when this book came out, published by the Review, I had some expectations of the future. I didn't believe we were yet into the third and final conflict because I believe that starts when the Pope declares war. It's how the Crusades happened, the Ottomans. There's always a push that extends a while before from the King of the South, but when the Pope declares war, now you know you're in it. I've taught that radical Islam was going to anger the papacy. The Pope would call for war against radical Islam. The United States and their allies would become the military enforcer, Revelation 13. Radical Islam would be overthrown. Moderates would follow papal-led Christianity, and some Muslims would follow Jesus in the Bible. So, when you put it in writing, you're kind of stuck. You did say it. You put it in writing, right? That was 2011. It was kind of interesting. It takes the Review about 2 years to go from rough manuscript to book in hand after 2 years from when they accept a manuscript till it's printed. I used to be on book committee, so I knew that. And in May of 2011, when they accepted my manuscript, I said, here's the deal. I will only sign the contract if you agree to have book in hand by August 1. This is May. I'm willing to give them 3 or 4 months instead of 2 years. And they said, ooh, we don't know if we can do that. I said, okay, then I'll look somewhere else for a publisher. Okay, we'll do it. And we had it. My reason? Said, I don't know how fast this is going to happen. When the book comes out, I want it to be prophecy, not history. I'm pretty sure about Daniel. All right? I'm absolutely certain about Daniel, and by now I've gotten fairly sure of my understanding of it. My understanding is always the questionable part. Daniel's solid. My understanding, yeah, that could be wrong. But 2011, summer of 2014 in sequence. These news stories are in date order. Okay, I'm just going to start at the beginning of the whirlwind, and you're going to watch the whirlwind unfold as we're watching it right now. July 1, 2014. For the first time since the Ottoman Empire, we have a functioning caliphate. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the self-proclaimed leader of the Islamic State stretching across Iraq and Syria, has vowed to lead the conquest of Rome as he called on Muslims to immigrate to his new land to fight under its banner around the globe. Day one of the caliphate, who does he say is his target? Rome, the king of the north. That was a little more direct and plain than I expected it to be. But it got my attention. Most people didn't get their attention because even most Adventists don't even think Islam has a role in prophecy. But boom, there it is. One of the things we were saying to watch for happens to be the first one. And it's on. And he wants to take how much of the world? Around the globe. The question now is, how long would it take the Pope, the man of peace, to call for war? It took 5.5 weeks. That was it. August 7, 2014, Pope Francis appealed to world leaders on Thursday to help end the crisis in northern Iraq after a sweeping advance by radical Islamic State's militants forced thousands of residents of Iraq's biggest Christian town to flee their homes. His Holiness addresses an urgent appeal to the international community to take action to end the humanitarian tragedy now underway. Very next day, Obama, the President of the United States, says America is coming to help. What was the next thing? U.S. would line up with them. Oh, that's pretty quick. Within 36 hours of the papal call for action, the United States struck the Islamic State for the very first time. Yes, you heard correctly. The United States had never hit them since they were formed in July up until August, it's 8 or 9 on that night. Pope calls for action, the U.S. hits. That should put you for sure into the third conflict when the king of the north retaliates. Now, some of the news media were saying, the United States a little bit gun happy, started shooting. Pope didn't really want military action, he wanted humanitarian action. Pope sends out his ambassadors to say, no, the United States did exactly what we wanted. The Holy See's ambassador to the United Nations, Silvano Tomasi, this weekend supported U.S. airstrikes aimed at halting the advance of Sunni Islamic State militants, calling for intervention now before it's too late. While the Vatican vocally disapproved of the U.S.-led campaign in Iraq in 2003 and the 2013 plan for airstrikes on Syria, fearing both might make the situation worse for Christians on the ground, fears of ethnic cleansing by Islamists has forced a policy change. Daniel 11 says it is a push from the king of the south that makes the king of the north come out and attack. And that's exactly what they just admitted to. We're in the third round, the third holy war. Neither side's been acting all that nice, have they? Look what the Muslims call the United States since then. They called Obama the dog of Rome, and they called the United States the dog of Rome. Why might that be? Well, if the Pope says sick 'em and the U.S. bites, it makes the United States the attack dog for Rome. Now, of course, they were getting hit by thousands upon thousands of missiles and bombs to help drive that point home. By the way, when Trump came into office, he doubled the number of bombs and missiles that were hitting them from what Obama hit them with. That's per day. Pope Francis wants to be president of the world. As we're just moving along now, look at what the Huffington Post, not a religious organization, said. But shrewdly, methodically, with a showman's flair, the soft-spoken 78-year-old Argentinian Jesuit priest named Pope Francis showed Thursday that he is running to become president of the planet. I want you to notice a historical trend. During the time of the Crusades, the world was afraid of a violent form of Islam, and they turned to the Pope for their leader. During the Ottoman time period, the world was afraid of a violent form of Islam, another caliphate. and they turn to the Pope as their leader. At the time of the end, we now have another caliphate. Who would the world turn to? It's right there. They're already doing it. Every time you have a violent form of Islam, the papacy rises in power and stature. Happening again. It is really easy to identify the papacy as the king of the north and the little horn and all that based on this prophecy and what's going on in the world today. In a public audience, it's not hard at all. Then, as we continued to move along a little bit, we have a mass migration crisis, and it may get worse. Boy, those were prophetic words. I don't think this wave can stop, said Sonia Licht of the International Center for Democratic Transition. The global north must be prepared that the global south is on the move, the entire global south. This is not just a problem for Europe, but for the whole world. Oh, so the south is pushing against the north. United States, which border is in crisis, northern or southern? Southern. The global south is pushing on the global north. Now, do you know another name for the global south today? BRICS. But get this, the global south by the economists are considered to be China, Russia, Iran, and then some southern countries and Muslim countries. Whoa, the global south, China and Russia? It is interesting when you look at what economists call the global south, they match the King of the South alliance of Scripture. But we'll get into that a little more as we go. I'm just watching stuff, I'm going, wow, I didn't know how many ways this was going to be working out. During the 2016 campaign, which everybody thought was one of the most wild campaigns in record, 2024 has already beat that one. They asked Trump what he would do with radical Islam, and he has not changed his opinions. They are only more intense. The point is, radical Islam, want to do serious harm. We have to take them out. We have to take them out very, very swiftly and viciously if necessary. We've got to destroy the brand of jihad. Daniel says, the radicals, the jihadists, go down. Talked about Egypt. Egypt goes down. Yes, I believe Egypt will radicalize. You see, the people on the street are already in harmony with radical Islam. It's just El-Sisi and the government and the military that are opposed to it on the surface. But modern radical Islam grew out of a movement in Egypt in the 1920s called the Muslim Brotherhood. So Egypt is the birthplace of modern radical Islam. So everything is matching. And, Daniel talks about it being like a whirlwind, and look what Trump wants to do, very, very swiftly and viciously. And he actually tried that. We will reinforce old alliances and form new ones and unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth. Daniel 11 says, yep, that will be happening. Trump thought he was going to do it. He even thought he had, but that's obviously not true. But he wants in to finish the job. If he gets in or not, I do not know. But he or somebody like him will, and it won't be pretty when it happens. Trump said he was going to put the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. It actually had been law for about 20, 30 years that the United States was supposed to have their embassy in Jerusalem. But the president every 6 months had to sign a waiver to keep the law from going into effect. Trump didn't sign the waiver. And the law went into effect. It was supposed to go into that they would be opening that embassy in, it was something like 2021 or 2022. But notice, this is when Trump announces it. 6 days later, in a meeting in Turkey, you get a bunch of Muslims that are really furious. How dare the United States recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel? Soleimani, commander of the Al-Quds force, remember that's Jerusalem force from Iran, says his nation is ready to support the Palestinian forces in the Gaza Strip days after the U.S. recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. What links Iran and Hamas? Trump declaring Jerusalem the capital of Israel. There it is. Now, why is that a strange combination? Because Iran is Shiite, Hamas is Sunni. They don't always like each other very well. But when it comes to Jerusalem, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So the Iranians are going to arm Hamas in Gaza, the Palestinians. Have they done so? May carry this threat out. But what I want to point to you as well is, notice they talk about Al-Quds and they talk about Jerusalem in the same sentence, and there's no hint that they're one and the same place. This is how the media can lie to you right in front of you. Oh, we said, yeah, but they didn't tell you that it was the same thing. Al-Quds and Jerusalem are one and the same, folks. This is just the Arabic name. This is what we call it by. Same place. If you doubt me, look it up. Now, Iran, they have a bunch of propaganda pictures. I enjoy their propaganda pictures, to tell you the truth. This is Soleimani, commander of the Al-Quds force. Claims to have several hundred or thousand plus terror cells operating in the United States. He's got a radio in his hand. There's a bomb going off of the White House. The U.S. flag is falling. It says, "We will crush the USA under our feet." Who lives in the White House? At that moment, Donald Trump. Lives on the second floor. Look at what's coming out of the window right beside the Oval Office. Boy, they got Trump. That's the implications of the picture. If you know anything about Trump, you know he doesn't like to be threatened. And he comes on pretty harsh to anybody that threatens him. Ask any Republican that runs against him. Doesn't play nice. Yeah. How do you like to be Soleimani after that picture comes out? Didn't take that long. Saudi Crown Prince, Iran's supreme leader makes Hitler look good. Whoa. This is an Arab world leader calling the Iranians Hitler-like. In this triangle, Turkey, Iran, Islamist, they are trying to promote the idea that our duty as Muslims is to reestablish the caliphate. That the glory of Islam is in building an empire by force. We have no duty anymore to fight to spread Islam, but in the triangle of evil, they want to manipulate Muslims to tell them that their duty as Muslims requires the establishment of a Muslim empire. I believe the Palestinians and the Israelis have the right to have their own land, but we have to have a peace agreement to assure the stability for everyone and to have normal relations. How popular was that statement? There was gunfire in the palace within a few days, assassination attempt against Mohammed bin Salman. He went into hiding for several days. The Iranians thought because he was not publicly seen, he was dead, and they started to celebrate. Mohammed bin Salman came back out in the open. Think he likes Iran better or worse after that? If you're a world leader, do you really want to get close to somebody who celebrates your death while you're still alive? Starts to let you know that between what you might call moderate Islam and radical Muslims, the caliphate believers, there is already a fight to the death going on in the Middle East. Daniel 11 describes a three-way breakup of Islam. That split is on. Then the Pope heads for the Middle East. The meaning of the Pope's historic visit to the United Arab Emirates. What is changed in brief is the dual rise of the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamic State. The following analysis applies equally to the Emirates and to Saudi Arabia. Facing direct challenges, the Gulf states calculated that they could no longer appease Islamists and should instead crush them. In 2001, Saudi Arabia was tolerating radical Islam. That's why the hijackers were predominantly Saudi. But then the Saudi government woke up because they realized that the radicals actually wanted to overthrow the House of Saud. Whoops, we got to get rid of them. And they began executing people who were sympathetic to radical Islam, like Khashoggi, a friend of Mohammed bin Salman. Come on, I just went blank of the mastermind. Bin Laden. He was a friend of bin Laden. And he was killed in the consulate in Turkey. But that's all about the fight between radical Islam and moderate Islam. Continuing. That is precisely what they have done, both in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. The institutional authorities of Islam and the political authorities with which they are aligned have just bought themselves an institutional ally, if not a theological one. Who's this ally they're talking about? The Pope. Whether the alliance keeps the theological barbarians at bay is another question. Daniel 11 has moderate Islam following after the Pope. And you suddenly have a group of Muslims that make an alliance with the Pope. This is the United Arab Emirates that he's visiting. It applies also to Saudi Arabia, it says in the article. This is no right-wing paper. This is the Atlantic. You'll notice I have a variety. I don't look at just left or right wing. I look at all kinds of sources, because if you only look at one, you're going to be twisted. So, what is interesting, the United Arab Emirates are the first ones to join the Abrahamic Accords after they sign this agreement with the Pope. Then Iran pulls out another picture. See the ships that are on fire and smoking? The Houthis actually got a tanker yesterday burning out there in the Red Sea area. They're hitting a lot of ships. Why are they doing it? The Houthis will tell you it's because they're supporting the Palestinians in Gaza. But this is long before that. Take a look. You've got Israeli and American warships on fire and sinking. It says we drowned them all. They always like to put this one little English thing to irritate the English-speaking world. What's the focal point? Alaska Mosque. Alaska deluge, October 7 of this year, Hamas. What did Soleimani say he was going to do? He was going to arm the Palestinians. See the water? That's a Palestinian headscarf. And the Palestinians call it Alaska deluge when they attack Israel on October 7. You think they want to carry out what they're talking about? You don't have to guess what they're up to. They keep telling us. Jerusalem gets caught in the middle, folks. So will you. Then Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the caliph of the Islamic Caliphate, the Islamic State Caliphate, was killed. They just put another one in his place. He got killed. They put another one in his place, and the last guy seems really secretive. Trump said that the Islamic State Caliphate was defeated. Just a little tip. They're not defeated. They've spread all over the place. They're even holding territory all the way down into Mozambique. South of the equator, they've made hits. They're out there. They have not gone away. But even more dangerous is Iran, who wants to take over as the caliph. And that gets interesting when in January 3 of 2020, Soleimani, the commander of the Al-Quds force, the number 2 man in Iran of power, was killed by order of Donald Trump in a drone strike in Baghdad. I mean, they blew him to pieces. There wasn't much to collect. The night of January 7, 4 days later, I was getting ready to present to a group of pastors at a pastor's meeting. And I was on my computer changing my presentation because as my presentation time was approaching, Iran was sending their first wave of attacks against American bases. Iran had said that they would not work through their proxies. They were going to attack the U.S. directly in retaliation for Soleimani's death. Trump had said, you better not. He said, if you kill one American, just know this. I've already got, I think it's 68 missiles dialed in with targets, one for each hostage during the Jimmy Carter years that Iran had held. He said, you need to know what the targets are. They include military targets, they include cultural targets, and they include religious targets. Those last two are never on the U.S. target list. NATO and the United States tries very hard not to hit cultural or religious targets. They try to avoid that. But Trump has right up front said, those are on my first wave attack. What is Trump saying? That he's going into holy war mode. You kill one American, and we're taking you out religiously, culturally, and militarily. And Iran launched missiles at American bases in the Middle East. These were just the headlines at that moment. And the here that it was war. How could you launch missiles at American bases? They were blowing up on American bases at that moment. How can you do that without killing anyone? Here's the miracle. 50 to 100 Americans were so close to bombs blowing up, they got concussions. And no one died. That's a pretty hard trick, to set your missiles off that close to get that many concussions and not kill anybody. And because nobody died, Trump held fire. No Americans died. There were others that did. They accidentally even shot down a passenger plane during that attack. But no Americans died. I believe Revelation 7 came into play here. I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or on any tree. Do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. This tells me that everything was ready to go. And God said, time out. My people aren't ready. That's what that verse is saying, right? He's going to hold it until his people are ready. Do you know whose fault it is that people are suffering in the world right now? It's ours. We're not ready. We've got to get serious about sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ and his prophetic message. Get out there, share it with the world, so that there can be an end of pain and suffering on this planet. How long does a timeout hold? You never know. I think the timeout quit in October. Did the Muslims give up after that? No. Alaska preacher. Jerusalem will soon be capital of a global caliphate. This is up on the Temple Mount. Muslim preacher. Siam can be seen telling the enthusiastic crowd that 3 prophecies would soon be fulfilled, that the rightly guided caliphate will be established, that Jerusalem will be liberated and established as its capital, and that Islam would achieve world domination. I want you to notice when the Jerusalem Post talks about it, they don't say Al-Quds, they say Jerusalem, because they want you to know what's being talked about. The more liberal the media, the more left-leaning the media, the more likely they won't tie them together than let you know that Alaska is Jerusalem. Jerusalem knows. Jerusalem Post. Then COVID-19 hit. What happened to the threat of radical Islam? If you're just based on reading American newspapers or American media, you would think radical Islam disappeared. It didn't. It was rebuilding after the Trump attacks. Crisis Magazine, a conservative Catholic publication, said, "Not since the Cold War have we experienced such violent political, cultural, or spiritual unrest. Not since the Civil War has our country been so divided so bitterly against itself. Our civilization is under attack from the far left within and radical Islam without." And Seventh-day Adventist scholars are arguing, is it the radical left or radical Islam that's the king of the South? Well, both of them are doing the job. Now, it was early in 2020, looking at the text, that I came to the realization that it actually is both of them. That radical Islam gets its ally out of Revelation 11, and the papacy gets its ally out of the United States and NATO out of Revelation 13. And if you watch what happens, that is playing out all over. But we'll get into that specifically this afternoon. Then Biden wins the election, and when a left-leaning administration always emboldens radical Islam. And Daily Mail in the UK, talking about France, civil war is brewing in France. Sweden has some problems too. What am I talking about? Muslim no-go zones. Where if you're not Muslim, you better not go in there, and if you're a police officer, you better go in with armored personnel carriers. You don't just go in there without armor. That's in Western Europe. Nigeria, how's it doing? Well, 2021, when I took this number off, first 200 days, 3,462 Christians were killed in Nigeria by Muslims. That hasn't changed. It continues. 3,000 to 5,000 Christians a year are killed in Nigeria for simply being Christian. How often do you hear about that in the media? The media doesn't care about African Christians. And that really irritates me. You see, I've presented in northern Nigeria, where every time you have a Christian meeting, you are at risk of being attacked, bombed, or shot. Do you know what Christian churches do? It is hard to get around major cities on a Sunday in central Nigeria. Do you know why? Because the Christians park their cars on the streets around their churches. I mean, they block the streets. Why? Because if they don't, a car bomb or a truck bomb will drive up to the church while they're in it. You ought to see the armored personnel carriers that the Nigerian army has running around on the weekend. They have these giant snowplow-like devices on the front of them, and it doesn't snow there. It's to get through a bunch of parked cars if they need to. When's the last time you packed your church out while it was under bomb threat? If there was a known bomb threat here today, how many of you would be somewhere else? That's every week there. And they packed their churches. I was in a church up in the northeastern part. U.S. guy from the U.S. State Department said, don't go past city of Jos. Don't go any further north than Jos. He said, that's the fault line. Don't go beyond there. My driver picks me up at the airport in Abuja, the capital city, and we head north. A while later, I see the town of Jos coming up. I said, how far are we from our destination? He said, about an hour and a half. Don't go past Jos, just an hour and a half. Okay. What do you do when a taxi stops in front of your car here in the United States? You stop too, right? You better not there. Just like the U.S. military does not stop when a car stops in front of them in many parts of the world. You slow down a little bit. You line up your bumpers, shove them out of the way, and accelerate and keep going. Why? Because if they can stop you, they can kill you. You know how fast my driver was driving on 2-lane roads with pedestrians and potholes? And I'm not talking about kilometers. I'm talking miles per hour, between 90 and 100 miles an hour. It's harder to hit a moving target. We have no idea, Karen and I, how many times we had assault rifles and machine guns pointed at us that day. We made it. At the church on Sabbath, I'm presenting. They told me not to leave the building between Sabbath school and church. I was a bad boy. I needed some fresh air. There were 2,000 people in the church. About 30 cars in the parking lot. How they got there, I don't know. But I stepped out the door and I turned around and came right back in when I realized there were soldiers in the doorways with machine guns facing out. They were packing the church. They're brave Christians. I've kept in touch with some of them. Some of them have lost their church buildings. They get blown up. They keep sharing the gospel. That's not just a number to me. I know the people that are doing it. And there's some really awesome Christians. The Taliban's 20-year victorious alliance with China against the U.S. and the Uyghurs. Whoa. The Taliban's alliance with China and the Taliban? Radical Islam, radical left, folks. If you can't see it coming, unprecedented joint military exercise tests U.S.-Israeli readiness against Iran. That was 1 year ago. During the exercise, it was revealed that Iran had enough nuclear fuel for several atomic bombs. All they had to do was decide to build them. That'd take a couple of weeks. What does that tell me? That since then, we've been living within a time period that within any couple of week time period they decide to go, Israel will take them out. Because Israel said, we will not allow that to happen. So it's not just about Hamas. It's about who's sponsoring them, which is Iran. I had told Khomeini, that's supposed to be September 12th. He marks 9/11 with speech celebrating America's demise. And Biden had given him $6 billion in funding on 9/11. That's less than a month before the Hamas attack. Growing number of people on the U.S. terror watch list encountered at the border, DHS says. Whoa. In other words, there's a growing number of bad actors that are crossing the border that they know about, and there's huge numbers they don't know about. Are you looking at a potential terrorist attack in the United States? Big time. Israel, giving unheard of assent to Saudi nuclearization. Israel girds for Cold War with Iran. This is really important to notice, folks. Saudi Arabia was on the verge of signing the Abrahamic Accords, signing agreements with Israel for normalization, giving Israel definitely the right to exist. Look at how American and Israeli officials differ. American officials still think of Iran as ultimately rational and able to be deterred. A regime full of sound and fury, but ultimately devoted to its own survival and stability, and thus loath to engage in conflicts it cannot be sure it will win. The Israelis think of Iran rather differently. It is a revolutionary regime willing to destroy nations. And October 7 hit. It was interesting. It was on a Sabbath. On Friday night, I was in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mountain Home Church. And Friday night one of a 10-day public seminar on Daniel 11. And I told the people, actually, I'm going to talk about current events on Tuesday night, but I don't know what I'm going to say yet because there's still 4 days between now and then. Who knows what will happen? And the next day, it blew up. Drudge Report is just world headlines collection. Alaska deluge had begun. Israel's 9/11, somewhere around 1,200 killed, 3,000 injured, and 130 or so hostages. Keep praying for those hostages and the people on all sides where the bombs are falling. Israel's response, mighty vengeance. Look what happens the next day. Well, actually, it's still October 7. They're announcing what they're going to be doing the next day. New York Socialist rally for Palestinians, day after terrorists killed over 200 Israelis. Obviously, they were still 1,000 short on that count. But Marxist socialists, on the day of the attack, are announcing demonstrations in favor of Hamas the next day. And I've been pushing that radical Islam and radical left are really allies. And all of a sudden, this was about to be proven big time out in the open. Iran helped plot attack on Israel over several weeks. Across the Middle East, a surge of support for Palestinians as war erupts in Gaza. The Muslim world coming together, by and large. Russia and China refused to condemn Hamas atrocity as Western nations express anger at terror group. Moscow and Beijing only comment on violence as Iran praises Israel's horror. Times of Israel. European leftists panned for casting blame on Israel over brutal Hamas attack. Middle East on the verge of the abyss, UN warns, as Gaza suffers and Israel prepares for the offensive. In the last couple of days, the UN had to fire, there was about a dozen people of their employees who were actually participating in the terrorist attack of October 7th. Take a look at how Hamas feels about that terror attack. Israel is a country that has no place on our land. Hamas official Ghazi Hamad told Lebanese news outlet this week, "We must remove that country. We must teach Israel a lesson, and we will do this again and again. The Alaska flood is just the first time, and there will be a second, a third, a fourth, because we have the determination to fight." He also said, "The existence of Israel is what causes all that pain, blood, and tears. It's Israel, not us. We are the victims of the operation, of the occupation, full stop. Nobody should blame us on October 7, October 10, October 1 million. Everything we do is justified. And the radical left agrees with them. They justify the rape, the killings of men, women, and children. The king of the South is pushing. And traditional Christians are getting really angry. And they want to come back. Take a look at the Israeli war alliances. Who's with Hamas? Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Syria, and radical left around the globe. Who's with Israel? United States and NATO are and they're linked to papal-led traditional Christianity. That's an interesting combination. That's exactly what we talked about in these books. This is the Ukraine war. Who's with Russia? China, North Korea, Iran, Syria. Same thing is with Hamas. Okay, who's with Ukraine? Secular West, NATO, and papal-led traditional Christianity. It's not just one war. In the last week, I saw this article. World War III has already begun as a warning issued, no chance of peace for decades. It's one war, not two different wars. This is talking about Ukraine and Israel. I've been saying this for a long time. It's just nice to see somebody put it in print in an international paper. One war of one bloc, the bloc of aggressive dictatorships, Russia, Iran, and their proxies. He identified China as the current leader of this bloc and stressed the need for a united front from democratic countries worldwide. World War III has begun. And what is it? It is the war described in Daniel 11. It's already on. And this week, IDF strikes Iran-Hezbollah airport, launching major escalation. Oh, so the Iranians have an airport in Lebanon. It flies an Iranian flag. And Israel decided it was time to eliminate that airport. Except the world is holding its breath, hoping that Lebanon doesn't join the fight with Hamas against Israel. But Israel just went in on the 25th and blew up that airport. Israel is saying, we will not tolerate this. And if you want to push on us, just know that we will take you out. Israel is ready to see it expand. And they're ready to go after Iran. Every day I wonder if this is the day that it totally blows up. Because it's not going to give you a warning. It's just boom, it's going to happen. Israel will not be saying, tomorrow at 5 o'clock we're going to attack Iran. It will just suddenly blow up your news feed when it happens. That's where we are. Look at verses 44 and 45. But news from the east and the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go out with great fury and destroy and annihilate many. Notice he doesn't go home. He's all over the place this time. And he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help. Tidings from the east, Edom, Moab, and Ammon, the remnant from within Islam. Tidings from the north, God's remnant out of Babylon, the king of the north. A remnant out of the Christian world and a Muslim world that come together and share Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Joel describes it this way, and it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. And all over the Muslim world, by the hundreds of thousands, Muslims are having dreams and visions about Isa, Jesus, the man in white. And they're following Jesus as their Lord and Savior, and they're being told to follow the Bible as their guide for life. Oh, this is supposed to happen just before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. Daniel 11, the final conflict, just before the coming of Jesus. Joel 2, it's all happening, folks. Praise the Lord. We could be out of here soon. God's people get caught in the middle, but Jesus saves. Don't follow the left or the right. We'll talk about that this afternoon. I want you to notice something. Radical Islam goes down. There's this little opening right here when God's people, His remnant out of Islam and Christianity, stand and deliver for Him. What is Daniel 11 for? It's not to tell you when to run and hide. Sometimes Adventists are always asking me, when should we run to the mountains? Wrong question. When should we stand and deliver? The loud cry, tidings from the east, tidings from the north, happens at the fall of Islam. When you have a global fulfillment of Bible prophecy, it gets everybody's attention. And boom! God opens up the opportunities. And here's the point. If you're doing a good enough job sharing the gospel, you may not have to run and hide. Why? You might be in prison before that. But hey, it's not about hiding, it's about standing up for Jesus Christ. It's time we quit trying to hide. If I don't miss it, you're pretty timid about sharing the gospel. Because you're normal. We've grown up in a society where it's not very acceptable to be openly Christian. You shouldn't say anything that could upset somebody. Well, you're supposed to be loving and kind, but say it anyway. Jesus should be your example. Anybody get irritated with Him? Was He loving and kind? Yeah, He's your example. Let's start being like Jesus. Daniel 11 is happening. The final push is on. We are right about to hit that time. The practice would be, it's really time to start sharing your faith more and more and make sure you're completely committed to Jesus Christ. I'm going to do it quickly. What I'm watching for, Egypt radicalization. Also, global Islamist attacks, especially in the United States and Europe. King of the North allies in Israel, and the United States has aircraft carriers and invasion teams sitting off the coast of Israel right now. Islam, the radical Muslim and the radical left division, and by the way, Democrats splinter over Israel as the young diverse left rages at Biden. He went with Israel, they want to go with Hamas. The left is splitting just like Islam is splitting. Jordan escaping, somehow they escape. And right now, it's interesting. Jordan attacked Syria last week. Which side are they on? Nobody can always tell. Maybe that's how they escape. And watch for true and false revival. I'm going to get in that this afternoon because fire from heaven's already falling, folks. From Revelation 13 and the great deceptions, it's already on. The King of the North is on the roll. Romans says, now it's high time to awake out of sleep, for now our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Therefore let us cast off the works of darkness and let us put on the armor of light. I want to go home. It's time to wake up. And if this hasn't woken you up, try this afternoon. That'll really get you. Hopefully you're already awake. And I want to wake you up so well that you don't go back to sleep. So please come back this afternoon. and it will be the most politically incorrect stuff that I present. But it will be done with gentleness and respect.